supposed to be temporary to get to an eventual solution for DACA, eventual way to address those who were brought here by their parents as kids, and now some of them are adults here undocumented. And so, but they're saying that, look, this was temporary and it's not going to be enough.
Antoine, I want to ask you a little bit more. No matter what the president says, and actually, you know what? We see him walking up right now. This is a major announcement that he's expected to make. Let's listen in.
Presiding over the swearing in of 5 new great American citizens. It was a beautiful ceremony and a moving reminder of our nation's proud history of welcoming legal immigrants from all over the world into our national family. I told them that the beauty and majesty of citizenship is that it draws no distinctions of race or class or faith or gender or background. All Americans, whether first generation or 10th generation, are bound together in love and loyalty, friendship and affection. We are all equal. We are one team and one people, proudly saluting one great American flag. We believe in a safe and lawful system of immigration, one that upholds our laws, our traditions, and our most cherished values. Unfortunately, our immigration system has been badly broken for a very long time. Over the decades, many presidents and many lawmakers have come and gone, and no real progress has been made.
Welcome to Waters World. I'm Jesse Waters. President Trump pitching a new deal to end the government shutdown and get his border wall. The president welcoming America's newest citizens during an Oval Office naturalization ceremony before announcing his compromise.
Our plan includes the following: $800 million in urgent humanitarian assistance, $805 million for drug detection technology to help secure our ports of entry, an additional 2,750 border agents and law enforcement professionals, 75 new immigration judge teams to reduce the court backlog of, believe it or not, almost 900,000 cases. Our plan includes critical measures to protect migrant children from exploitation and abuse. The plan includes $5.7 billion for a strategic deployment of physical barriers, or a wall. This is not a 2,000-mile concrete structure from sea to sea. These are steel barriers in high-priority locations. In order to build the trust and goodwill necessary to begin real immigration reform, there are 2 more elements to my plan. Number 1 is 3 years of legislative relief for 700,000 DACA recipients brought here unlawfully by their parents at a young age many years ago. Secondly, our proposal provides a 3-year extension of temporary protected status, or TPS.
Now, with a new deal on the table, the ball totally in the Democrats' court. Here to help us break it all down, Fox News national correspondent Ed Henry, Fox News national security strategist Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Republican National Committee spokeswoman Kayleigh McEnany, and former Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz. Ed, we begin with you. This totally changes the dynamic now in the Capitol. How has this shifted responsibility?
Yeah. Let me tell you what the president said and then tell you what he really meant. And that's the key. He's trying to put Nancy Pelosi on defense. It was basically message, I care. Yeah, I want to talk about the wall. I want to talk about the barrier, but I'm going to talk about humanitarian aid. He's going to help DACA recipients. 700,000 DACA recipients basically get 3 years of protection. They get to stay in the country while they figure all this out. TPS means protected status for about 300,000 people who are in this country now who could be deported, who are from Honduras, Guatemala, places like that. So those are the details. In exchange, he wants the $5.7 billion for a wall, a barrier, a fence, whatever you want to call it.
UK Prime Minister Theresa May barely survived a no-confidence vote by just 19 votes Wednesday, a day after lawmakers rejected her Brexit deal by a historic margin. Now, earlier, the Prime Minister spoke outside 10 Downing Street.
I believe it is my duty to deliver on the British people's instruction to leave the European Union, and I intend to do so. So now MPs have made clear what they don't want. We must all work constructively together to set out what Parliament does want. That's why I'm inviting MPs from all parties to come together to find a way forward. One that both delivers on the referendum and can command the support of Parliament. This is now the time to put self-interest aside.
The pressure's on. May now has until Monday to come up with a plan B. Now, as the UK enters its deepest political crisis in about half a century, America is beginning to realize how big of an impact Brexit could have on the U.S. and its economy. The UK is the fourth largest export destination for U.S. goods and services, and Britain leaving the EU could impact everything from the agricultural sector to manufacturing. For more on this, Patrick Temple-West is a financial services reporter for Politico, and he's joining us now from Washington. First, Patrick, in your piece you wrote that the U.S. is more exposed to Brexit and the fallout than any other country outside Europe. Explain that. Explain why.
That's right. Because of the financial sector, U.S. banks and other financial companies have long-standing relationships with London, the global financial hub. The UK is about the fifth largest economy in the world, so the United States was already interconnected with the financial sector through London.
Now, U.S. companies have said that a hard Brexit would be detrimental to certain industries. First, can you kind of explain what they mean by hard Brexit and which industries could be impacted the most?
The financial services could be impacted specifically because the same situation, the same conditions occurred during the U.S. financial crisis of 2008, when we had complex financial instruments and uncertainty. When Lehman Brothers declared bankruptcy, the regulators didn't know all the consequences that had. A no-deal Brexit could set off the same set of uncertainties that the financial companies can't predict, that the U.S. regulators can't predict and can't anticipate. So that's why a no-deal Brexit, a situation where the UK crashes out of Europe without a deal on March 29th, is the worst case scenario at the moment.
Is that what they mean by like a hard Brexit, and that's why it could be a problem?
Hard Brexit is a Brexit deal that has some conditions, but at least it would be a plan. The soft Brexit is what the financial industry wants: keep as much of the UK in the EU as possible. A hard Brexit would be more aligned with what the Brexiteers of Britain wanted when they voted to leave originally.
And moving past the economics part, this could also impact foreign policy and how the U.S. works with Europe to track, let's say, terrorists, for example. Explain what could happen.
Well, it really comes back to the financial sector. The U.S. economy intertwined with the U.K., and as the uncertainties mount, with the uncertainties in how Brexit is going to be negotiated, that's where the U.S. could really be vulnerable to a no-deal Brexit or a chaotic Brexit situation. As you heard, Prime Minister May is continuing to keep her promise that the UK would break with the EU on March 29th. However, it remains to be seen how she plans to do that. Now, we've seen her extend open negotiations to a wider array of political parties. Mm-hmm. This is similar to in the U.S. when Speaker John Boehner was in control of Congress, and the Tea Party was reluctant to refused to go along with him. He expanded his vote count to see if he could do a deal with some moderate Democrats. That's the same situation that's going on in the UK right now. And if the deal continues to be in jeopardy as it is right now, that's where the U.S. is vulnerable.
Now, in the past, President Trump has said Brexit is a good thing. Are there any advantages away from the economic sector for the U.S. if there is a Brexit?
Down the road, yes, but in the short term, it's all uncertainty right now. Potentially, as the UK, as the voters to leave the European Union hoped, the UK would be a stronger country without its exposure to the European Union, which they believed was an albatross dragging down the UK. If the UK can break away from that, it can do bilateral trade deals and other relationships with the U.S., and that could potentially be a strength, could be a benefit for the United States and the UK. But that would be years down the road.
The financial capitals of New York and London, of course, keeping a close eye on this. Patrick Temple-West, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
10th consecutive Saturday of yellow vest protests have taken place nationwide in France over what they call rising living costs and government policies. That's despite the President Macron's efforts to quell the unrest by launching a national debate, which he's promised will result in a new social contract. Tear gas and water cannon were again deployed by police to disperse the demonstrators.
Tensions here in Paris today as Act 10 is underway of the Gilets Jaunes. Over in the distance, you might be able to see the water cannon there trying to disperse the protesters away from this area. We did see protesters actually trying to break down some of the traffic lights, and we've also seen tear gas being dispersed. It looks like there's some people down on the ground a little bit further over there by a tree. It looks like they potentially could have been injured, and as you can see, the protesters are trying to throw back the tear gas pellets now towards the police. Official figures from the Interior Ministry say around 7,000 people are out in Paris today taking part in this 10th weekend of protests. According to those figures, across France, it's 27,000 individuals. That is far lower than the figures we saw just a week ago when there were more than 80,000 people out across France. But the Gilets Jaunes have often disputed those figures from the Ministry of the Interior. Well, as we can see, there is anger out in the streets now. Let's take a look back now at that anger that's been bubbling over since November 17th.
Our course is the right one, and we're not going to change it just because the wind is blowing.
I will not concede anything to those who want destruction and disorder. I take my share of responsibility.
As you can see, some damage to a vehicle there. Protesters trying to throw projectiles towards the police. Somebody there being dragged away. Looks like they've received an injury as a result of something that's been hit. And there you can see just chaos ensuing as they're trying to get somebody injured out of this crowd. For the moment, there's also been lots of violence against journalists in these protests, and there was actually a protest underway today against that violence. I can just hear behind us something sounding like it's being smashed up. I mean, really has just gone from total calm into chaos in just a matter of moments. This protest was meant to be in tribute to the people who have died in these protests since they began and also been injured in these protests. And it looks like there could be even more injuries today.
Almost 90 years ago, the Russian Airborne Assault Forces, also known as VDV, considered to be among the finest fighting forces in the country. Their traditional blue berets and striped undershirt stand as symbol of elite fighters in Russia. Today, the berets, as you can see, are replaced with white helmets. The guys are going to the skies today. Before the troopers board the aircraft, all the equipment should be very carefully checked. Obviously, any mistake could cost the lives of these young military men.
It takes just 15 seconds for 56 paratroopers to jump from the airplane and another 3 minutes to land. The rear door is now opening, meaning 3 minutes before it all starts. Wow, windy!
Russian paratroopers are taught to land any time of the day, any season of the year, on any terrain, deep snow like this one, or sand. And they improve their skills during training, like today one. They're landing on us right now.
Scientists say Antarctica's ice is melting 6 times faster than it was 40 years ago. Now, according to a new report, the melting of the protective ice sheet could lead to an exponential rise in the sea level, possibly within the next century. Now, the continent currently holds 90% of the world's ice, and if that ice barrier were to melt, it could trigger a cascade of land ice into the ocean. Now, joining me now is the lead author of that study, Eric Rignot. He's a professor of Earth System Science at the University of California at Irvine. Eric, thank you for joining us. What's causing the ice to melt so fast?
Well, what causes the ice to melt is the flow of the glaciers. They're flowing faster into the sea. So it's not the conventional melt that we're used to, where we see the melt from the snow and ice from warmer air temperature.
Now, what can we expect to see from this rapid melting of the ice sheets?
Well, we would expect to see more land ice dump into the ocean and faster rates of sea level rise in the future, and especially from East Antarctica, which was until recently viewed as the more stable part of Antarctica.
Now, somebody in, say, Oklahoma or Kansas or Arkansas might not really care about oceans rising, but explain what would occur if there was a rapid rise in sea level, especially on the coasts.
Well, along the coast, we have millions of people living and very expensive infrastructures, including airports, for instance. You know that on the West Coast, the airports in San Francisco, for instance, are within 1 meter of sea level rise. Mm-hmm. So if we have several meters of sea level rise, we would have no airports along the San Francisco Bay.
And let's talk about immediate threat. What does the melting pose as an immediate threat?
Well, immediately, it's a very small leakage of the Antarctic continent into the ocean. The rates are very small. But you should see that as a big balloon with a few holes in it. And as we look at it, we find more holes every time. And at some point, the big balloon might explode.
Now, your study also found that East Antarctica is likely more sensitive to climate change. Why so, and why is that significant?
So it is so because the main culprit, the main driver of the changes in the Antarctic is not exactly the air temperature, it's the ocean around the Antarctic. Okay. The ocean contains heat, and that heat is being pushed by the changing winds around the Antarctic continent and melt the glaciers faster. The fact that this participant is a big deal because it holds a lot of potential for multiple meters of sea level rise.
And final question, is there anything that can be done at this point to curb or kind of prevent that ice from really, just, can it be slowed down, or at this point is it too late?
No, it is not too late. We cannot change what's going to happen in the next 20, 30 years because the climate system is on a roll. But we can affect what's going to happen in the later part of the century by curbing our carbon gas emission and having a better handle on climate warming.
It's a startling report. Thank you very much, Eric Rignot from University of California at Irvine. Thank you.
Scientists say civilization is in crisis, but our diet can be the solution. A new report suggests a radical change in the way we eat, starting with strict limits on red meat.
It corresponds to roughly one fairly good-sized hamburger per week, or if you like a big juicy steak, once a month.
Dr. Walter Willett is part of a team of scientists reporting for the Lancet Health Journal. The diet overhaul is designed to protect future generations and the planet by promoting better health. It says by the year 2050, global consumption of red meat and sugar should be cut in half, and that people should eat twice as many nuts, fruits and vegetables, and legumes. Americans currently consume more than 6 times the recommendation for red meat, even though cattle are one of the biggest culprits in producing greenhouse gas.
Our goal was to define a pathway whereby we could feed about 10 billion people who will inhabit our Earth by 2050.
The guidelines cut dairy to 1 serving a day and fish to 2 servings a week. For some cultures, the recommendations would overturn generations of tradition.
I welcome them because they're important in recognizing the links between health of our populations and health of the planet, but they may indeed be quite difficult to roll out across the world.
Scientists say it will be worth the sacrifice, saving the environment and preventing 11 million premature deaths each year. Tina Kraus, CBS News, London.
So China is using technology to maintain domestic stability and become a global AI superpower. We're taking a closer look at how the communist country is ditching democratic ideas and choosing big data instead.
The government is working to keep citizens satisfied, so democracy appears obsolete and unnecessary in regards to everyday life. So for more on this, let's bring in CBS contributor Alex Clement. He writes for Signal, a newsletter produced by G0 Media. Good to see you.
Likewise. Morning.
This is so interesting.
Yeah, it is. And
scary.
60 Minutes has done a story on this, the artificial intelligence that is being employed in China. So we've seen that they use this to track and monitor Uyghurs, for example, people, dissidents, as well as track people based on sort of a social credit score. Give us the big picture here.
So really what China has made an extraordinary gamble, which is that if your technology is good enough, if your artificial intelligence is smart enough, and if you have enough data about people, you'll never need democracy, right? I mean, 30 years ago, the Chinese government said, we're willing to open the economy, but we're going to maintain a Leninist authoritarian state. And everyone said, this can't work for long. Sooner or later, you need democracy. How will the government know what people want, where to apportion resources, how to run things? And the Chinese gamble is, if your computer is smart enough and you have enough data about people, you can do it with AI. And we focus a lot on the repressive aspects of this, right? They use surveillance, gait recognition technology, face recognition technology, suppression of dissidents in Xinjiang and all these things. The other half of it is it's not just about making dissidents' lives harder, it's about making everyone else's lives better. So if you can have sensors and monitoring that know how the trains run, what the air quality is, how good people are doing in school, how the hospitals are running, data about public safety, in principle, if your AI algorithms are smart enough, they can monitor that, understand what people need, and apportion resources appropriately so you never have to deal with the mess of democracy.
Right.
That's the gamble that they're making.
So people will be so happy that they won't protest, they will never criticize the government and all that sort of stuff. But the trade-off is your privacy.
Yes.
You know, maybe that's a gamble that's worth it. Maybe people really don't appreciate their privacy all that much. I mean, look at us here, right?
Yeah.
We've been handing over our privacy to private companies for years now. So, I mean, is that likely to work? Do people not care that much about their privacy?
Well, listen, if people here are willing to hand over all of our privacy, much of our privacy, in exchange for commercial and material efficiency, what's to say that 1.4 billion people in China wouldn't give over their privacy for governing efficiency? You make the trains run on time, you can get away with a lot, right? That's basically the fundamental gamble. So when we talk about how China is trying to become an AI superpower in the 21st century, that's about controlling an industry that has global implications, but it's also about making sure that China can remain a politically authoritarian country and a stable one at home.
welcome back. As you can see, the Fox and Friends weekday crew tried the so-called 10-year challenge.
Great photo, by the way.
Steve. But it might be a good thing that we missed out.
Yeah, because the new theory has people wondering if the challenge was a way to mine data for facial recognition.
Wait, Facebook wanted to mine data? Joining us now with what you need to know, senior fellow at the Center for Digital Government and National and Cybersecurity Contributor for The Hill. It's a long title, but he deserves it because he's a great guy. Morgan Wright. Good morning, Morgan.
Hi, hey, Ed. How are you?
Good. Well, I mean, this seemed like a really fun thing. I saw all kinds of celebrities jumping. All right, I'll do it. And it seemed fun. What's really going on here?
Yeah, we're going to hold the world ransom for $1 billion. It's a plot by Dr. Evil. Initially, is it just a mean gone bad, or is it really an insidious plot? 3 years ago, we might not have said that about Facebook because we had a lot of trust with them. But after Cambridge Analytica, after the data breaches, after the use, how they used the platform, Russia did, and then in the race against Roy Moore down in Alabama, the fact that we don't trust Facebook anymore is their problem, not our problem, because they haven't done enough to talk about the privacy issue. And I think this is a huge privacy concern that people are unaware of.
It's a great point. I actually learned you can turn off the facial recognition aspect of your Facebook if you want to inside your profile. Facebook says, though, nothing to see here. We reached out to them. And this was their statement back to us. They said the 10-year challenge is a user-generated meme that started on its own without our involvement. It's evidence of the fun people have on Facebook, and that's it. So they say absolutely nothing to see here, but you're right. There's a big trust gap here.
Well, look, they also said, look, there's all sorts of pictures on Facebook. However, though, for artificial intelligence to work properly, it needs what's called machine learning. To do that, you need to put these things in context. I've now told the machine learning, here's a picture of me 10 years ago. Here's a picture of me today. Here's the context it was in. Was it at night? Was I wearing sunglasses? Was I wearing a hat? All of these things, the machine learning needs to train so that the artificial intelligence gets really better about picking you out in a crowd of people, Ed, when you've got sunglasses and a hat on.
Morgan, the fear here also by many is that who is this information going to be shared with? We know that Google and Amazon have shared their facial recognition technology in the past. So when you speak to people about this, a lot of people at home sitting and say, well, why does this matter to me? What is the core concern here of who is it, who can pick it up or where it will land? Is that what you're worried about?
Yeah, I'm worried about this getting into the hands of marketing, of other people who I didn't consent to give to. And before people say, well, that wouldn't happen, remember, our private messages were supposed to be private unless you were Netflix and Microsoft, and they were selling access to this information when they weren't supposed to. By the way, Facebook is under investigation now. They may be facing one of the largest fines from the FTC for violating the consent order.
We'll be following it. Morgan Wright, appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, sir.
Well, more and more young adults are dropping out of church. According to a recent study, 66% have stopped attending. So what's behind this? Let's bring in Scott McConnell. He is the executive director of Lifeway Research, which conducted the survey. Thank you so much for being here. So we're talking about this issue of losing their religion and why these young people have abandoned church. Some of the things you found, 2/3 of young people stopped going to church between ages 18 to 22. Why?
There's actually a number of reasons, and the average person who drops out gives 7 different reasons.
Okay.
Top one being moving away to college.
Okay, we're gonna flip through these as you talk about them. So 96% cited life changes. Is that what you're talking about?
That's what the biggest life change. The other one is just work responsibilities, keeping them from attending church.
Okay, so basically life gets busy. It's not necessarily an intentional decision, but it's life happens and they haven't really planned for it.
Exactly.
Okay, let's take a look at some more reasons why. The 73% said church or pastor-related reasons.
And that comes into things like not feeling connected with people at church. I mean, that's an important part of church life. But we also see that when they don't agree with some of the social and political views of the church, that's another reason to disconnect.
One thing I read that was interesting is some said that they felt judged, that there was a judgmental element, which is a really interesting facet of that.
That's a big factor that kind of weaves through both the political piece as well as just other decisions they're making in life. If they're feeling disapproval from the church when they pick a job and when they pick a spouse, that's going to weigh on whether they want to stick around.
Okay, so let's move on to 70% cited religious, ethical, or political beliefs. Now, that just means what? The social issues, or they're finding themselves out of line with where the church is standing on What issues in particular are we looking at?
It tends to be more on the political and social end. Honestly, it's only around 10% or so are actually no longer believing in God or the real fundamental beliefs of the church. It's things like the political views of the church. And when they feel like they're not being accepted, they're not being welcomed, if they have some different views, then they're going to be stepping away.
Okay, and last one we have is 63% said student and youth ministry reasons. What's that about?
So this is a new section of the survey because we've done this survey 10 years ago and a lot of the factors stayed the same. This is a new area, and again, connecting with your peers is a really important part of a young person's experience in church, and connecting with a youth leader is an important part of that.
This is really interesting. So it's not necessarily a secularization of this group of people, but they're feeling disconnected, they're feeling unheard. So there is potentially a way to fix it, is the good news.
Absolutely. Church, we outlined some of those ways in a brand new Lifeway book from Ben Trueblood, saying that these young adults are within reach. And one of the biggest things that churches can be doing is for adults in the church to connect with young people.
Yeah.
When a young person can name 3 or more adults that have personally and spiritually invested in their life, then they're 3 times more likely to stay in church.
Wow.
When they notice their family doesn't like attending church, they're not going to stick around either. And so we see some of those patterns in their lives that the church can actually be doing something about, and their own family can do something.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate your perspective.